Hello, we'd like to welcome everyone today to a very important, timely presentation, Know Your Rights, Police Interactions and Protesting. And today I'm joined by my good and great friend and colleague, Ray Cawthon at Student Legal. Ray, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm, as Lane said, Ray Cawthon. Been an attorney here at Student Legal Services since about halfway through 2013. Before that, I was a trial lawyer for 15 years, and happy to be here today.
Great. Thank you so much, Ray, for that. And let me also, I have a little list of just introductions and thanks to everyone here. First of all, just wanted to give a shout out to Graduate and Family Housing, our great friends there, and Muriel and Jason, Demetria, for allowing us to do this presentation. It's always a pleasure doing this, and we look forward to more outreach with housing in the future. Also, just wanted to briefly introduce John Adcock, who was traveling, unable to be here today. He's the boss and director of Student Legal Services. He combines over 34 years of legal experience, 16 of which have been at Student Legal Services. Prior life, he was a litigation attorney and has brings eminent experience, as does Ray, up to this office. Also, a shout out to Alicia, our associate director, who's worked over 25 years at the office. Daylene Frank, who prepared this presentation and is the major inspiration behind this. Her major is English. She's currently a senior. We spent many hours working together via Zoom, putting this together. She's very artistic. The ideas that were presented um, worked with me through many of the images, the content, and certainly kept me focused for a long time on this. Um, and myself, Lane Freebor, I have 23 years working as an attorney and graduated from UF Law School. Entered in fall of 94, graduated in the class of 1996, and I've been working, going on now, 9 years at Student Legal Services and have loved it. In a prior life, I started my career as a public defender, and I was in private practice, worked with Ray for a period of time as well. In 2011, Student Legal Services contacted me, and it's been a wonderful experience here ever since. Also, wanted to thank PJ Jones at MCDA for also being the inspiration and for presenting kind of the initial idea behind this, and many of the content were really based on her concepts. A shout out as well to MCDA, U.S. Student Government, for supporting us, and Ryan Gavin, who is the marketing and media specialist at Student Government. And we certainly thank her for helping us put this together. Without further ado, let me get started here. First of all, we are attorneys, so there's a legal disclaimer. Remember that this information is educational in nature. It is not intended to constitute specific legal advice, and it's certainly not a substitute for consulting one of us, one of your free confidential attorneys regarding your case. And remember that the information contained herein is that of U.S. Student Legal Services only, and not necessarily reflective of the official policy or position of the University of Florida, the UF Board of Trustees, the Board of Governors for the State University System of Florida, or the state of Florida. And any opinions expressed by participants are solely their own and are not necessarily endorsed by Student Legal Services or the above entities. We also want you to realize each situation that we discuss is very unique and based on a number of factors. Therefore, we recommend that you always speak with a Student Legal Services attorney about your specific issues. And you can apply for services on our website to make an appointment. If you do need to reach us, studentlegalservices.ufl.edu, or you can just type in on Google free attorneys UF. And next to the content notice, our workshop provides a best practices guide based on research, student cases, input from students, civil rights organizations, law enforcement, and attorneys. Some of it may be emotionally and intellectually challenging to engage with. While care was taken to present all the information in a legally neutral, nonpartisan, non-controversial format, some content and images may be offensive and or upsetting. If you find the workshop to be upsetting in any way, you may choose to leave it at any time and or not participate in the discussion. We do ask that all participants help create an atmosphere of mutual respect and sensitivity. We also want to remind our viewers today that we're nonpartisan, non-political, and non-discriminatory, and our student voices are welcome and heard. A little bit about Student Legal Services. We've been providing free and confidential legal services to students since 1977. Um, and we're funded by student government with your activity and service fees. We're located in room 3500 of the Rights Union. John always wants to make sure that I mention this, Ray, that right now we're not allowing walk-in, right, consultations. They need to contact our office. And again, you can just go to studentlegalservices.ufl.edu, schedule an appointment with us. You can also call us at 352-392-5297. Because of coronavirus, we just want to make sure that everyone is protected, everyone is safe. Just to let you know, we're one of the first SLS programs. We grew out of the student rights movements of the 60s and 70s. Now there are over 250 student legal service programs in the US and abroad. Okay, meeting our staff. I told you a little bit about them, but John Adcock is our director, Alicia DeBeg, our associate director, Lane Freebor, an attorney, Ray Cawthon, an attorney, Joy Thomas, an administrative assistant. And between the four attorneys, we combine over 105 years of experience, and Joy brings an additional 8 years of legal experience to our office. It's a long time, isn't it, Ray? I guess when we do the math on it.
I like to brag to students that we are one of the most experienced law firms in Gainesville, and we are exclusively here to serve the students. So I think that's a pretty good resource. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that, Ray. Yeah, I know John always says he'll put us up against any attorneys, in our field with in regard to the cases that we encounter. And that's a good segue into what we do. Assistance in court representation. We understand the last place our students want to be is probably court. But if necessary, we can go to court with you in Alachua County for landlord-tenant cases, which are apartment and housing rentals, typically, name changes, removing criminal records for background checks, very important now. And I do want to emphasize that not only criminal background checks, but also credit reports are becoming more important in regard to employment issues, particularly if you're going to be working in banking or finance. We do divorces and step parent adoptions as well. So full service representation. Other areas that we practice in and we're not necessarily allowed to go to court in, but if we do our job right, hopefully we'll keep you completely out of court on it. We can do everything from a traffic ticket through criminal charges, insurance matters, medical billing, consumer matters such as defective merchandise. You buy a car, the car breaks down, financing, contracts, credit cards, of course, those credit reports that we talked about. Helping to clean those up, making sure the information is accurate, setting up payment plans if necessary, property damage, usually on our campus. Hope we get this right, Ray. Usually it's a moving vehicle, right? It's either a car or potentially a bicycle. Okay, we've handled many, many of those cases.
Yeah, I concur with that. Let me actually go back a little bit too. You had mentioned divorces. I think we should probably be clear that we only do divorces that are uncontested. In other words, that the parties have completely agreed on all issues. Um,
Good point. And no property and no children, right? Very, very important in that. Yeah, you have to understand we have four attorneys for 50,000 plus students. So our resources, we try to utilize them as efficiently as possible. Powers of attorney, living wills, healthcare surrogates. I can't emphasize getting those in place soon enough, particularly during the coronavirus. We also do notaries. Right now, please call our office to schedule notaries if necessary. Like I said, we're not doing walk-in notaries at this time. Also, in regard to student involvement, everything from reception, which I think is really the nuts and bolts of the office, answering phone, checking in clients, copying and filing, if you're curious about a career in law, you probably couldn't do better, okay, than actually working in our office. And you can discover how a law firm operates. Professional shadow mentorship program, one of my favorite. We can help you with law school planning, guidance regarding a legal career, observing client consultations. Very, very important. If you are interested in a career in law, you can look at real world cases as they come in. Of course, you'll be under the same confidentiality requirements that we are with the Florida Bar as well, not to divulge any of the confidential secret information that you hear. Internships as well in regard to research, marketing and outreach, and ambassadors. We have many outreach initiatives there. What do we not do? Um, Immigration and visas, income tax, personal injury, patent, trademark, and copyright, real estate, buying and selling of homes. And the reason that we don't do this is that we just have not had a lot of demand over the years for these particular areas. And they are so specialized, attorneys devote their entire career to doing them. But if you do have an issue in one of these areas, please still contact us as we have referrals, and the referrals have agreed to work with our office in providing lower cost services to our clients.
Can I jump in there, Lane?
Sure.
So with regard to taxation issues, it is true that we generally don't do taxation. In other words, we're not going to be able to advise you on, filing your personal tax return, that sort of thing. However, we do help student organizations with and they are almost always nonprofit organizations. And so there are some issues of taxation which are invoked by that. And so we do help your student organizations if you're involved with something on campus and you have some questions about obtaining an FEIN or setting up a bank account or taking in donations or anything like that. Even though those issues do touch on taxation, we can help you with those.
Thank you, Ray. Yeah, it's an excellent introduction to that. And we appreciate your service in those areas. Okay. These are also some limitations that we have. We cannot aid in these areas. Issues involving other U.S. students, for example, usually arises in roommate type issues where roommates may get in a bit of a tiff in regard to not washing dishes, etc. The reason that we can't get involved in those cases is because we represent all the students at the university. All the students are our clients, whether or not they're using our services at this time or not. So we can't pick and choose and say, you're the right student, you're the wrong student in those matters. Also, claims against the University of Florida, the state of Florida, or any state agencies, and disputes under $100. We hope you can handle those matters typically on your own or over $15,000. The great news is that about 98, 99% of our cases fall within those dollar areas. Also, cases that are frivolous or without merit. Eligibility. Who's eligible for our services? Students taking at least 6 credit hours, paying the activity and service fees, and registered student organizations, as Ray talked about. Please feel free to contact us. Okay, without further ado, let's get started in the presentation. You know all about our office now. Let's talk about police-citizen interactions, and later we'll go into protest rights. First of all, you're right. I think everyone knows this, but in the United States, you have the right to remain silent, okay? Now, there are some caveats to that, but we'll explain those in some later slides. You typically have the right to refuse to consent to a search of your person, of your automobile, your house. If you are not under arrest, you have the right to calmly leave. Okay, so one question that you may want to ask is, do I have the right to leave at this time? Am I being detained? You also have the right to a lawyer if you are detained or arrested. And regardless of your immigration or citizenship status, you have constitutional rights once you step foot in the United States. Your roles. Let's talk about it. Our job is to advise you in regard to de-escalation. Numerous studies, as well as our own anecdotal experiences with student cases, have taught us that de-escalation is the best policy, typically on all sides. We want you to stay calm and be polite in these interactions. Don't interfere with the police as they're doing their official duties. For example, Ray, we've seen this plenty of times, asking why they're bothering a friend. You try to step in and mediate the case between the law enforcement officer and your friend, and they're very likely to say, you have to step aside. I have to do my duties. If you continue to do so, you can actually be arrested for obstruction of justice. Please don't lie or give false documents, for example, someone else's or a fake ID. Prepare yourself and your family in case you are arrested, for example, by getting bail money together, and remember the details of the encounter. If you're stopped for questioning, stay calm, don't run, okay? Um, you cannot run away if you're officially stopped. Don't resist or obstruct, even if you're innocent or police are violating your rights. It's something that you can't win the fight in the streets, okay, against law enforcement. They are allowed to go about their official duties. Keep your hands where police can see them. You do have the right. Remember what I told you before. Ask if you're free to leave. And if you are under arrest or being detained, you have a right to know why that's being the case. And it's interesting. We actually chose this slide because this is a scene of law enforcement giving the same advice. Okay. Smiling, shaking hands, showing empathy in regard to this, in regard to de escalation, okay, of the interactions. You do have to identify yourself, okay? In some states, including Florida, you have to give your name if you're asked to identify yourself. And if they have a reasonable suspicion that you're involved in a crime or offense, they can ask for your name and identification. Okay. You probably heard when you get pulled over, you need to have your license ready, your insurance information, as well as your registration. However, remember that you have the right to remain silent about the facts of the case and to speak to an attorney. Talking about different areas, let's talk about if you're stopped in your car first. And we've talked about if you're stopped, in the street, just walking. If you're stopped in your car, we want you to remember, stop the car in a safe place as soon as reasonably possible. Okay. We've had reports sometimes where our students may continue driving for blocks, not realizing the officer behind them means to pull them over. And that's not really an excuse because in the state of Florida, if there's a car behind you with the lights and siren operating, Ray, this is correct, right? You have to pull over to the side of the road, right, to allow for their safe passage anyway.
Yep.
Um, Turn off the car, turn on the internal light we recommend at night, open the window and place your hands on the wheel. Okay, it's a little bit difficult in Alachua County. The last time we had checked, we were told that Gainesville Police Department and University Police Department recommends that you remain within the car. Alachua Sheriff's Office recommended that you get out of the car. What you can do is you can just lean out of the window and ask the officer their preference, okay, on that. If you're asked, show police your driver's license, registration, and insurance info, and you can refuse to consent to a search. However, if the police have probable cause of a crime, your car can be searched without a consent. For example, if they see an open alcohol container, or for example, if they saw any marijuana, okay, potentially a weapon, they can search the car at that point. Both drivers and passengers have the right to remain silent. And if you're a passenger and the car is pulled over, you can ask if you're free to leave. If the officer says yes, you have the choice of sitting silently and calmly or leaving. Drug sniffing dogs. Florida law permits the search of a vehicle without a warrant following a dog alert, and a canine unit may arrive shortly after you are stopped. I'm sure everyone that's either been driving or a passenger in a car has seen the canine units driving around Gainesville, and that's so that they can be ready and prepared if potentially if a car is pulled over. Remember that law enforcement cannot detain you longer than the time necessary to issue a traffic ticket. So we recommend you cooperate, get your citation as soon as possible. Not generally not getting in an argument with the officer. If you need to fight the ticket, you can come and see us later on. We can We can talk about it, whether or not going to court or potentially taking traffic school might be the viable option. If the officer asks you to sign for the ticket, remember that's not an admission of guilt, but simply that you received the ticket, because sometimes they put down the court date on it, and you have to sign to show that you've received that. And if police come to your home or apartment, you do not have to let them in unless they have a warrant. And there's typically a couple of types of warrants, although I'll talk about a third here in just a second. An arrest warrant allows police to enter the home if they believe the person is inside. A search warrant allows police to enter the home, but officers can only search the home for the items, the areas, and for the items listed on the warrant. So we have had some students that are concerned, like, how do I know that their officer is doing the official duty? Well, you can ask the officer to slip the warrant under the door or hold it up to the window so you can inspect it. And Ray, in Florida, we have what's typically called knock and announce, correct? So that's so that people don't get hurt or injured with police um, just suddenly entering an apartment or home. There is another type of warrant that I probably should talk about regarding home, and that is an electronic warrant, where the law enforcement can get a warrant, and they have the right at that point, if they believe that there's been illegal material downloaded, to potentially serve it, and to seize any electronic equipment within the house. But you again have the right to look at the warrant, make sure that that they're seizing or taking what's listed within the warrant. If police come to your home or apartment, even if the officers have a warrant, again, you have the right to remain silent, and you don't have to talk about the case at that point. We recommend identifying yourself. If you have ID on them, they're requesting it, please show it to them. If you choose to speak to the officers, you can step outside and close the door. Okay. And remember, if you have a house party, non-resident guests can also give consent to enter. And Ray, I should mention this, that if the officers have probable cause to believe that there are underage drinkers within the house, if they look less than 21 at that point, that can give them probable cause, right, to enter the house party.
Yeah.
And certainly seen that a few times, right? And the warning that I always give students on that is that the charges actually show up providing um, alcohol or drugs to a minor on background checks. So be very careful if you're having a house party, to make sure that all the individuals are over the age of 21. Consent searches. If you consent to a search, you waive your constitutional protection against unreasonable search and seizures. And many students who are thought for routine traffic violations are arrested because the police just see illegal drugs, weapons, or alcohol violations, like I told you, in plain view of the police officer. At that point, no search warrant is required, and they can search the vehicle. Police typically do not have to tell you about your right to refuse searches, nor get your consent in writing. Verbal consent is completely valid on this. Let's talk about Miranda rights, because there's a lot of misconceptions. First of all, many people believe they can beat the case if the officer doesn't read them their Miranda rights during an arrest. This is a myth, because the only time an officer has to read your rights is, number one, when you have been placed under arrest or detained, and the officer questions the person about a crime. This typically arises in uh, for example, an underage possession of alcohol, an MIP, where the officer has seen you with the beer in your hand within a club. They check your ID, which they're allowed to do. You're under the age of 21. They don't really have to ask any questions at that point, because they've seen you with an alcoholic beverage, okay, in your hand. So remember that police do not necessarily have to read your rights unless they want to question you about alcohol. If you are arrested, please do not resist, even if you believe the arrest is unfair. Now, we've had some questions about this over time, and certainly you don't have to resist the arrest itself, okay? Please don't. Later on, you can certainly fight the case. Give your ID info, and then you can say you wish to remain silent and ask for a lawyer immediately. remember what I told you that instead of arresting you, if they just ask you to sign a notice to appear in court, that's not an admission of guilt. But if you refuse to sign, that can lead to your arrest. You have the right to make a local phone call, and the police cannot listen. Okay, if you call a lawyer, prepare yourself and your family in case you are arrested. Make emergency plans if you have children or take medication. If your rights have been violated, again, remember police misconduct cannot be challenged on the street. Don't physically resist the officers or threaten them. I probably should ask as well on that, Ray, because we've seen calling names, right? Also, um, typically does not go over so well. Write down everything you can remember, including the agency badge and patrol car numbers, and get contact information for any witnesses. Take photographs of your injuries, but we want you to make sure that you get medical attention first. You have a right to file a written complaint with the agency's internal affairs division, and in most cases, you can file a complaint anonymously if you wish. You can also contact your local ACLU or visit their website. Okay, moving on to protest rights. Just a little bit of background here. I know all this information's been vetted by multiple individuals. First of all, the First Amendment contains some language within it that says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or of the right of the people to peacefully assemble. And the right to assemble means this right allows people to gather for peaceful and lawful purposes. Implicit within this right is the right to association and belief. And this has also been recognized in other amendments as well as the courts. In practical terms, what does this mean? As long as you're not using fighting words, obscenity, harassment, defamation, generally you have a right to voice your opinions. And it's very important to mention that dissent is clearly protected in America and in the Constitution. And we'll talk about, where are those boundaries in some adjoining slides. But speech codes have been struck down repeatedly in the courts, although institutions can regulate time, place, and manner, but usually not the content. Let's talk about time, place, and manner. Okay, no signs or banners hanging typically inside or potentially outside of campus buildings, okay, are allowed without permission. I should add that. No voice amplification outside except with permission. And again, that's because that can disrupt the school functions that are going on here. So you cannot disrupt university events as they're occurring. No blocking entrances or exits as well. If you have any questions about it, there's a resource handbook here that was put together by student involvement that includes this information. Big difference between protesting versus rioting. What is protesting? It's a peaceful public display of disapproval, chanting, and marching in public. You can demonstrate to have your opinions heard, influence government policy or public opinion in an attempt to enact changes. Protests can be done through rallies, vigils, marches, motorcades, and boycotts, and that's only a few ways that it can be done. And during virtual times, we've been seeing this done with Zoom, as well as various other social media platforms. In accordance with the Constitution, this is an inalienable right. No arrest should be made against peaceful protesters. Okay, let's contrast protesting versus rioting. Rioting is an expression of dissatisfaction with violence, um, using violence, vandalism, theft, and destruction of property. Rioting is a crime punishable by law. I'd also like to show just a picture here. This was done by our student, Daleen Frank. She prepared this, and certainly this can help illustrate what are the differences between protesting versus rioting. Police and protests. When can police disperse a protest? Police may not break up unless there's a clear and present danger of riot, disorder, interference with traffic, or other immediate threats to public safety. A good example is if you're marching, for example, in the street and it disrupts traffic flow, and there's a safety issue is there as well with protesters and cars. The police can ask you to move onto the sidewalk and may well do so. If, however, they issue a dispersal order to cease and desist, they have to give you a reasonable opportunity to comply, including sufficient time and a clear exit path. And you also have to receive the clear and detailed notice of it. And if you have any questions about this, this is a good link at the ACLU. Anything to add in that regard, Ray?
No.
Ray? Organizing a protest. Okay, let's talk a little bit about that. Your rights are strongest in what we call traditional public forums, such as streets, sidewalks, and parks. You also likely have the right to speak out on other public property as long as you're not blocking access to the building or interfering with other purposes the property was designed for. Private property owners it's much broader in that regard because they can typically set the rules for speech on their property. The government may not restrict your speech if it's taking place on your own property or with the consent of the property owner. And remember that counter protesters also have free speech rights. Therefore, police must treat protesters and counter protesters equally. Police are permitted to keep these groups separated, but should allow them to be within sight and sound of one another. And we certainly had a lot of questions about this over the day. And at the end, we can take any questions, or and I'll be also looking in chat. But sometimes our students have a problem with this. Remember that it's also a fluid situation as well. Okay, allowing you to be within sight or sound of each other. If it becomes very antagonistic or violent, at that point, police can potentially create more separation between the groups. Do you need a permit to operate? Okay, generally you don't need a permit to march in the streets or on sidewalks, but remember the important caveats. Don't obstruct car or pedestrian traffic, because the police officers can ask you to move to the side of a street for safety reasons. And I've been told that they have locally. We've not had major issues here in Gainesville, but the police have asked any protesters that have been marching in the streets to please move to the sidewalks, just for everyone's safety. Certain types of events may require permits, though. A march or parade that requires blocking traffic or street closure, okay, that has to be typically in Gainesville noticed, okay, with businesses, making sure that the streets are legally closed. The use of sound amplifying devices for the reasons we talked about earlier, and a rally over a certain size at most parks or plaza, because there are, particularly right now during coronavirus, there are safety issues for the protesters, making sure that everyone's rights are protected, but also making sure that everyone's safety is also protected, getting that balance in. Um, and remember that a permit cannot be denied if the event is controversial or will express unpopular views. There's generally not judgment thrown in regard to the event. If you require a permit fee, they should allow a waiver if the group or individual is unable to afford. And there's a couple of good links here about protesting and Florida statutes in that regard. Taking pictures or video at a protest. Okay, generally you have the right to photograph anything in plain view, buildings and the police, in public spaces. However, on private property, the owners can set the rules about the photography or video. Remember that the police officers cannot confiscate or view pics without a warrant. Okay, they can order, though, you if to stop if you're interfering with law enforcement operations or for safety reasons. Generally, we've seen that where individuals are in the street, with their phone. Potentially recording or taking pictures. If you're obstructing the flow of traffic, that can be a reason to ask you not to video, within the street itself. If you're stopped or detained for taking photographs, remain calm. Again, don't physically resist. And they cannot detain you without reasonable suspicion of a crime. If you're stopped, again, ask if you're free to leave. If the answer is yes, you can calmly walk away. If you're detained, ask what the crime is that you're committing. And remind the officer that taking photographs is your right under the First Amendment and does not constitute criminal activity. If you're stopped by the police for protesting, remember your rights. Stay calm, keep your hands visible, don't argue, resist, or obstruct the police, even if you believe they are violating your rights. You can politely say that you're not disrupting anyone else's activity and that the First Amendment protects your actions. Ask if you're free to leave. If you're under arrest, again, ask why. And remember that if you are arrested, you can or detained, you can ask for a lawyer immediately. Okay, you don't have to sign anything or say anything without a lawyer. And you can make a local phone call if you're arrested. You don't have to consent to a search of yourself of your belongings. However, remember the police can pat down your clothing if they suspect that there's a weapon, and they can also search you if you are arrested. There are helpful links to all of the above that we just discussed, and we try to put them in kind of a one site. And you can take a picture of this if you like, or there's a link at the very end, which will be a link to this particular PowerPoint. And if you go to the site, it's in PDF format, a little bit easier to download and to share. And certainly feel free to share. We want to make sure that this information is given out to others. And I'm going to give you some links as well to contact our office if you have any input about it, and ways to help us improve. Okay, students have come to us asking, for example, Lane, Ray, the protests, one day they're going to end. Where do we go after the protests end? Our role here is to give you some meaningful ideas. What can you do at that point? You can still raise awareness, okay, which is very important. Holding the system accountable is very important. And there are ways to do so. You can advocate for systemic change. And I remember in talking to MCDA, they were talking about the more difficult but critical questions are, what are the meaningful critical changes that we need to make, and why? Okay. And how do we get from point A to point B? Well, ways of doing so are getting involved in government. If you're curious about this, you can certainly contact me or this office. There are positions available on various Gainesville boards. You can get involved in regard to student government, certainly as well at the university. There are leadership positions, which are always important, various student organizations, voting rights, a big topic, big issue right now, as well as civil rights, criminal justice reform, police practices reform, equality, and equity. We also ask that whatever you do, be kind. It has been generally our experiences over time that being kind can get the point across. And Ray, you made a good I remember your observation once about just engaging individuals in dialogue, right? And you said that it's very hard to hold any hatred in your heart if you can engage in a dialogue with the person, right, at the same table. I thought that was kind of a meaningful comment that you made at one of our meetings.
Yeah, I think that more specifically, what I say in that circumstance is that I think it's very important for people to get to know each other. And I think once you get to know another person, you will either like or dislike that person based upon who that person is and not on other irrelevant factors. And, I think that's something that's very important and maybe in my mind doesn't get emphasized enough.
Thank you so much. Again, just to let you know where we're located, 3500 in your student union at the Rights Union. And our telephone number is 352-392-5297. Old school, if you do use that alphanumeric keypad, it's LAWS, 392 LAWS. You can also reach us again at Student Legal Services, all one word, .ufl.edu. And you can email us at sls@ufsa.ufl.edu. So multiple ways to get in contact with us. And again, let me emphasize that rather than walk-in appointments during coronavirus, please contact us via the email or the phone, or if you need to apply for our services, just go to the website directly. Okay, here's a great presentation link. If you just simply go to this website, if you want to take a picture of this, I do recommend it. You can go right there and download this particular presentation, and you can click on the links within it. There's a workshop quiz here. The questions, I'm going to knock off recording, and we'll definitely get into that. If you'd like to do a workshop quiz about how well you retain this information, Dave put this together, and it actually includes some excellent questions as well. It fleshes out more of the topic, everything that we could not get into as well. Workshop feedback. Feel free. You can use this Q code right here, and I'll leave it on here for just a few seconds. If you want to take a picture of that, it should lead you directly to our website. And or you can click on this link here for SLS presentation evaluation. And again, I'm sure Ray would concur with this. We listen to the feedback very, very carefully. We value the free feedback, and let us know what worked in the workshop and what we can do to improve the workshop, okay, on both ends. We really thank you for that. And I'll leave that on for just a second. I'm going to knock off recording as we go into the chat phase here. And Ray, again, thank you so much for co-hosting with me. It's always a pleasure doing this. And I want to thank again all the individuals that I named before, and especially graduate and family housing. And we look forward to collaborating in the future. Thank you so much, everyone, and take care.